Each year, the town and city members of the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities get together for the explicit reason of setting a legislative agenda for the coming year. These priorities are deeply connected to the well-being of our residents and our state, connecting special education and property taxes to recruiting police officers and affordable housing. It's all connected in Connecticut, and CCM is continuing its work to improve the everyday life for every resident of this great state. CCM Director of Public Policy Brian O'Connor is joining us today to discuss these priorities and more. The Municipal Voice is a Connecticut Conference of Municipalities podcast in collaboration with WNHH LP 103.5 FM. I'm your host, Matt Ford. As always, be sure to give us a like and let us know your thinking in the comments. CCM's Municipal Voice podcast continues to present a key forum in important state-local issues. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the consensus views of CCM or a member of municipal leaders. Brian, thanks for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
So we've asked you on to talk about our legislative agenda for the upcoming session here. But first, before we get into the specifics of our agenda for this year, for the listeners at home, can you talk a little bit about the process of how we get to these proposals, or how they go from proposals to our agenda for the year?
Sure. It's something that we as a policy department revamped over the last 2 years, and I think we've seen the benefit of that. Every year we solicit proposals from our existing, our CEOs, as well as some of their, building departments and, education, and we get input from them as well. We have 5 policy committees, basically that the bills or issues we go through.
Okay.
And these are again made up of who the CEO either assigns or many of them participate themselves, depending on the issue area. They go over the issues that have been presented to them. We also seed them some of the issues that came up last year, and we're looking for a little bit more input this year on them. And through that, basically each policy committee, will get their top 3 proposals. Okay. And then they bring it to a full legislative committee meeting, which occurs in the fall. And then after we winnow it down a little bit more or expand it, depending on the wishes of the committee, legislative committee, we ultimately have a vote. We actually physically have a vote where we give everyone some stickers and they get to set their own priorities. And then, this year we had a tie actually for the last couple. So we included all of them in our policy agenda as far as priorities go.
That's cool. That's the voting that takes place at our annual convention, right?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And it's good because, you get a lot of people, attendance is great. And, you get some further feedback at that meeting as well.
Very cool. So getting into all the issues for this year, I think the first one we're going to cover is police officer, firefighter, and EMT recruitment and retention. And on this, our recommendation is to support efforts to increase the number of qualified applicants and volunteers for public safety and emergency service positions within municipalities. Can you talk to us a bit about some of this?
Sure. Last year this was on our agenda as well. And last year we asked for a task force to consider these issues, what we might be able to do to promote and recruitment, but also retain who we have. Unfortunately, the legislature did do that. So I shouldn't say unfortunately, we were able to get that passed, but they didn't meet. So the task force didn't meet. So we're emphasizing that they get together and actually get the task force off the ground and start focusing on that issue because it's so important. Now, more and more towns are having to go to paid departments, at least partially. And I think it's just something where even coverage, we're worried about the public safety concerns by not either having enough career firefighters or volunteer firefighters enrolled in our towns.
Yeah, so the shortfall makes it a problem for people to respond adequately to emergency situations, correct?
Yeah, particularly during the workday. People work further away. I know there's some remote aspects now that people are working in town, but I think, because of the certification process, it's becoming harder and harder to first maintain the credentials, but also to attain them in the first place. and we're just getting less people that are interested in it, and we're trying to tackle how to best to
Mm.
get them back on board.
So is this a recent problem or this been kind of growing for a while?
It's been growing. I'd say it's become more acute over the last couple of years, but I'd say, over the last 5 to 10, municipalities have seen uh, a pretty steady decrease in the number of
Mm.
people, first applicants for career departments, but also, just volunteers. Some towns used to have 50 people, now
Hmm.
they're down to like 35. And even the young junior firefighters in particular, and people like that, they're just less people in the pipeline.
Yeah. Is there a certain factor of like burnout from people too who are leaving earlier because, of the stresses of the job?
I think that's part of it. I think with particularly with police officers, I think
Hmm.
there's been a lot more stress related situations.
Hmm.
That many of them are retiring. And again, where they might have in the past had 100 applicants, now they might have 10.
Yeah,
And, so I think it's something that we want to turn around.
definitely. So our second big issue that we wanted to talk about today was trash to energy expansion. What is trash to energy and why do we want to expand it?
Yeah. Well, let me paint a little picture. So
Okay.
Connecticut, we closed the trash to energy plant in Hartford.
Okay.
And because of that, now I think it's 860 tons per year approximately are
Hmm.
being of waste is being shipped out of state.
Okay.
And what this does is this increases the tipping fees because the cost of transport out of state is more
Hmm.
expensive. And it's one of those things where we also like to handle our own waste. I
Yeah.
think, not only principally, but also practically, because eventually a lot of these out of state landfills are,
Hmm.
they might not accept our waste. And I think that's something that we should be very concerned about. So we've been looking at different initiatives to, reduce the waste.
Hmm.
I think one of the things that we've been doing, many of our communities anyway, they're starting with the school districts in particular, is trying to get rid of organic waste or food waste,
Okay.
take that out of the stream. And I think that's like 30% of waste, believe it or not, is food.
So that would be
So
like
if
a
we're able to take,
composting sort of program?
yeah, I think that's many towns are starting to do that.
Hmm.
And many school districts actually have implemented it with their students. And I think
Hmm.
part of it is part of the education, but also, just it's just makes good sense.
Hmm.
Now, it's very labor intensive. So a lot of towns
Okay.
haven't done a full system on it yet, but it
Hmm.
is something that I think many towns are exploring. And deep, the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection is also trying to incentivize that.
Yeah. So eventually this might be the kind of thing where you have like a third bin out by the sidewalk or something.
Yeah, in theory, yes, that's how it's operating right now. Many towns have their own collection site at their
Hmm.
local transfer station where people can bring their organic waste
So it's
to
sort
it.
of been a volunteer sort of situation in a lot of places so far.
Yeah, a lot of it's been piloted. Yeah, there's been some seed money again from the um, deep. The
Hmm.
agency has been trying to incentivize towns to try to implement this on a better, bigger scale.
Definitely. Well, it sounds like it's kind of a big problem. When we ship stuff out of state, where does it go? What states are taking
I
it?
think a lot of it goes to Pennsylvania and Ohio, and
Mm.
some of it is on rail, and other parts are just general trucking.
And the general worry there is not only is it expensive, but at some point they could just say we don't want it anymore.
Yeah, and start closing some of the facilities that we're using today, or
Hmm.
because you have no leverage in the situation that the prices just keep going up and up.
Up and up and up. Well, sounds like it's important
So
stuff to work on.
yeah, and I think, I just want to point out when, as far as the trash to energy, um, one of the things that we're exploring as an organization
Hmm.
is expanding the existing four or seeing
Okay.
if we might be able to cite a fifth one. Now that obviously comes up with, not my backyard or NIMBY.
Hmm.
Finding a host community might be difficult, but looking at the existing four might be an opportunity there as well.
Interesting stuff. So our third area of focus that we're looking at is to maintain focus on reducing property taxes, which is one of our perennial sort of issues. But for the people listening at home, why is this something that we have to talk about every year?
Well, currently there's many statutes on the books that aren't fully funded. So I think one of the things that we're trying to, emphasize with the legislature and the governor's office is let's meet those commitments. And we made great strides. The legislature and the governor's office 2 years ago passed a substantial increase in pilot. This is
Okay.
payment in lieu of taxes.
Okay.
And last year, we actually increased it again by 3%. So we made some very good progress there, but we're still underfunded, as far as what the state statute emphasizes.
So as far as what was originally promised with pilot, it's still not all the way there. It's gotten better, you're saying, over the last couple of years, but it's still not fully funded.
Yeah, we're still probably a couple $100 million short from if it were fully funded. I think it's probably upwards of 300 million.
And this impacts our cities a lot too, right? Any place with non-taxable properties like hospitals, universities, that sort of stuff.
Yes, that's a great example. We have a few municipalities, some of our urban core, but also even some of our state university towns have close to 50% of their property. If actually, I think there's a couple that have over 50% of the property is tax exempt. And it really makes it difficult, with your grand list trying to, balance your budgets and meet the needs of your residents.
And I know one thing we talked about was allowing municipalities to assess tax-exempt properties a fee for services such as police, EMS, road maintenance, and stuff. Can you
Yeah,
talk about that?
that's an issue. We haven't really made as much progress as we would like. But I think, what you look at historically is that nonprofits are much different than, the mom and pop nonprofit of the 1980s or even 70s. And now you look at some of the hospitals, they're basically businesses and they're buying more and more doctors' practices. So that's an example of where something that used to be on the tax rolls is now pulled off. And, I think also if you look at group homes, they have a higher preponderance of calls in many
Okay.
instances in our communities. So I think it's just to, basically, they're part of the community. We believe these fees would, can be substantiated by, the services that a municipality provides them.
Yeah. So group homes are currently on that exempt list,
Yes. Yeah. Many of them are. Yes. If
but
it's a nonprofit. Yeah.
okay. But when they call up because they need an ambulance, it's the town's ambulance that's coming, and that's what we're talking about here is that the
Yep.
expenses.
Or
Yeah.
police calls. Yeah. And, everyone, we don't, pull the plow up when we go by your facility.
Yeah.
We do plow the streets and, I think the fire departments, it's very important that you just have that coverage.
Yeah.
And I think, we look at it as a fairness issue.
You are listening to the Municipal Voice on WNHH 103.5 FM. Our next issue that we were looking at was increased funding for special education, where we want to increase the current level of state funding for special ed, which is, in our opinion, inadequate. Why is it inadequate, and how can we figure out this problem?
Yeah, this is another area where the state's commitment for fully funding special education, the excess cost grant for special education, is not fully funded. Again, we made some strides last year. We did get an increase, but again, it's below, and it's not really keeping up with the rising costs of special education.
Okay.
This is an area where we get a lot of feedback from our municipal leaders, basically saying it's outpacing the money that is coming in. And I think, a couple of our proposals. One is right now, you get reimbursed if the cost of the special needs student is above 4.5 times of the average cost of educating a child in your town. And we're looking to lower that to 2 times. Anything over
Hmm.
2 times would be reimbursed by the state. Yes, it's kind of aspirational. It's a big jump.
Yeah.
It is a lot of money, but I think it is something that we want to stress the importance of.
And when we're talking about this, these are big expenses, especially for some of our smaller towns. If they have even just a few students move in or out of town, that can really affect their budget, right?
Yeah, and that's actually, one of our other proposals is MBR. This is the minimum budget requirement. So
Hmm.
basically, whatever you spent last year, you can't go below that.
Hmm.
And one of our ideas is to allow towns some flexibility again. If a student does move out or age out, that they're able to reduce that expenditure,
Hmm.
based on the cost of the student that just left the district. Um, and again, it is it a panacea? No, but I think it's also a more accurate reflection of the true costs of providing special education
Yeah.
within your local school district.
And the MBR, does that also come into effect with towns that might have shrinking school populations?
Yes, it may, depending on who um, has, left the district, but also the per pupil expenditure. Now, that's another item that we're trying to address and is very important. I think
Hmm.
we are able to reduce MBR. Let's say if you shut down a school,
Hmm.
you do get to reduce some of that overhead. Um, the thing that's interesting now is that ECS is more tied to student enrollment. So you are seeing, um, while we were successful last year in maintaining ECS funding for those towns that have
Hmm.
seen decreasing enrollment, it is an issue going forward that you're going to be paying for students that aren't there.
Yeah. Um, so our next issue, not as exciting as the other ones, but increasing tax abatements for affordable housing. Can you talk a little bit about that one?
Affordable housing is actually probably one of the key or larger issues that the legislature has been focusing on over the last
Hmm.
couple of years. And I think a lot of our municipalities are trying to increase affordable housing opportunities.
Hmm.
And one of the issues that has come up is infrastructure costs,
Okay.
whether it be water and sewer, but also the fact that many of the developers, when they first conceived of the proposal or project,
Hmm.
the cost of labor has gone up, the cost of materials have gone up. So
Mm.
when the town has given the abatement, um, the amount of money just again hasn't kept up with the market conditions. So I think what we're looking to do is to increase uh, the tax abatements that are available through
Hmm.
the state.
That's interesting. So some of these projects have been going on long enough that the change in cost of materials and whatever is affecting the final bill or whatever that is there.
Yeah, I'd say, the last two, because of the inflationary conditions, it has been, a problem. I think actually you've seen a little bit of stabilization on that. So
Hmm.
hopefully, we'll have better, again, market conditions than we do, than last year. But at
Yeah.
the same time, the pace of which, those costs have gone up,
Hmm.
it's only slowed. It hasn't actually going down. It's
Yeah.
just the increase is going to, the increase is just slower than it had been. And I think, again, we want the tax abatements to reflect what is going on and also to encourage and make it work for the developers to do the affordable housing projects, especially in our downtown centers.
Yeah. And that's really the point of these payments is to encourage the building of these affordable housing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. In order, when they pencil it down, many developers, they need a certain subsidy because you're taking away some of the market rate.
Hmm.
So in order for it to work, especially some of the apartment complexes, you need that tax abatement to help alleviate some of the costs that are driving the inaffordability.
Yeah. Especially maybe in some of the more higher income towns, the difference might be greater.
Yeah, I'd say, it's not even some of the higher income tax. It's basically all municipalities,
Okay.
if you look at it. Um, there's but I think that's where you're seeing it more, some of our suburban communities.
Hmm. Um, so and One of our final big six we were looking at for this year is the retaining of land use officials. We wanted to create some flexibility in state certification processes. Can you talk about,
Yeah,
what the issue is there and how we would like to kind of address it?
yeah. Actually, CCM has been working with the Capital Region COG,
Hmm.
as well as the State Department of Administrative Services to see if we might be able to address this concern. And I think what it is that there's just less people, again, kind of like with the public safety.
Hmm.
There's just less people applying. It's harder and harder to get certified. And right now, from what I understand, is you can only do it once a year. It's like in January,
Okay.
so upcoming. So we're looking again for more flexibility in maintaining your certification, but also attaining it. And how do we best do that? I think the other thing we're looking at is reciprocity
Hmm.
between different states, that those credentials, if they meet our criteria, that they'd be okay. They wouldn't have
Okay.
to go through the Connecticut process. And this will help with recruitment. Right
Hmm.
now, what you're seeing is a lot of our municipalities are just poaching from themselves.
Hmm.
And, the talent pool, there's just not enough volume in it.
Yeah. So one, we can't get the people from the other states because their certification doesn't apply over here. And if we did get them to come over, they might have to wait if it's February till the following January to get their certification here.
Yeah. And the building in particular, I want to focus on that a little bit, is that some of the projects where you want to get a sign off or a CO,
Hmm.
you just might not have enough staff to do it as quickly as maybe the developer would
Hmm.
like, and it slows projects down. So I think that's one of the things that it has become a big issue for many of our towns.
Yeah. So those were our kind of big six issues we were looking at, but obviously as we said earlier, there's a whole voting process. A lot of stuff got brought up before this, and there's quite a few other ones. What are some other issues that stand out to you from our agenda for this year?
One I really want to touch on. There's two, but
Okay.
I'll lead off with street takeovers and the illegal use of ATVs and
Okay.
motorbikes.
This is a whole bunch of
Um,
motorcycle and ATVs on the road. We've seen it, or they're popping wheelies, and just the whole road is full of them.
yeah, and they're also using cars and all the rest. And what it's
Hmm.
really done is shut down. I think they even shut down I-4, tried to at one point. And I think what we're looking for is more tools to in order to address it. This is
Hmm.
something that it's becoming more and more of a problem, not only in Connecticut but nationwide.
Hmm.
Uh, in fact, the FBI is involved now, where they have a tip line. If you hear something going on,
Okay.
you can let them know, and they would avail their resources to the situation. And I think one of the
So if
things
you
that
knew
we're
ahead of
looking
time, someone heard rumor that there was going to be one of these, you could call this tip line and let them know, like, hey, I heard that there's going to be.
correct.
Okay.
And that's the idea it's much easier to prevent it than to stop it once it occurs,
Hmm.
because you just get overwhelmed. I think just the sheer number of people that are involved now, many police departments, again, just don't have the adequate amount of bodies. And plus, you don't want it to escalate to a situation that becomes um, where people might get injured and such. So it's a very delicate balance again with how they're addressed.
Yeah, like you have to police it, but at the same time, you want to turn to some sort of high-speed chase or anything that could endanger the public even more than it already is.
Yeah, especially some of the residents that unfortunately get caught up in it.
Hmm.
You have people walking over your car and just hitting it, that kind of thing, and it's really potential for a really bad situation from
Yeah.
occurring.
And
And I
so,
think, one of the things I want to go on that. I think, New Haven actually has spearheaded Mayor Elicker, and
mhm,
along with some of the surrounding first selectmen and women, to see what they might be able to do. They're actually doing a regional approach on it,
yeah.
where they're putting the regional resources of police uh, in a situation, again, first to prevent it, but if it does occur, how can they have enough enforcement
Hmm.
and also make the enforcement matter? So one of the things that we're looking to do is to amend the law so that we authorize the Central Infractions Bureau to administer payable violations up to $2,000. Right now,
Okay.
it's only $250, but many of our communities have, by ordinance, have increased the fines up to $2,000. So we're not
Okay.
looking to do it for everything, but just these situations with street takeovers and the illegal use of ATVs and motorbikes.
So we got it up to, you said 2,000, but they're only collecting up to 250. This is the problem?
Right now, they're by law, um, a lot of the violations,
Hmm.
they go through the Central Infractions Bureau.
Okay.
And what we would say is, but it only goes up to $250. What we're saying is for street takeovers and ATVs, the illegal use of that, it goes up for those situations up to 2,000, that they'll
Hmm.
be able to handle and administer it. Right now, it's just up to the municipality to do it. And it just makes it a more seamless process.
Right. So the idea is to really give those fines some real teeth to really discourage this behavior.
Correct. Yeah, because
And
then it gets tied to licensure,
mhm,
registration, and it's a lot more of a disincentive to participate.
250, and they might just be like, all right, it's part of the cost of doing this and pay it off, but 2,000 might be enough to make people really pause and
Correct.
reconsider. Yeah. Um, and you said you had two others that you want to touch on. What's the other big one that's
Yeah, the
sticking
other
out to
one,
you?
we passed it last year. Firefighter Cancer Relief Fund.
Okay.
That's actually been on the books for a couple years now. But what we did last year is create a system that is outside of workers' comp. That was very important to our membership. Unfortunately, the amount of funding that is needed is inadequate at this point in time.
Hmm.
Again, we thank the legislature for putting a pot of money into the fund, but there's no sustainable revenue. And I think that's one
Okay.
of the things that we're going to focus on is getting a sustainable revenue source. Um, Many of our members and maybe some of our listeners and watchers uh, will know that we actually put something on the books back in 2016 that
Hmm.
had a charge on a cell phone bill, but because we didn't specify that it be tied to the Cancer Relief Fund, the federal
Hmm.
government actually deemed that it was illegal, that we couldn't do it. So
Okay.
I
So
think that's one of the areas that we'll look at. I think the other thing as well is with some of the PFAS lawsuits, Connecticut is anticipating
mhm.
receiving money. A lot of our turnout gear for firefighters in particular uh, has PFAS in it.
Yeah. And PFAS
And
is
so
it's the chemical that doesn't go away. What's the problems with it?
forever chemical.
It's a
Yeah,
forever
it doesn't
chemical. Yeah.
break down.
Okay.
And it's been deemed to cause cancer,
Okay.
so that's one of the areas that to help alleviate that, maybe some of the funding can be used for the Cancer Relief Fund for firefighters because they
Yeah.
they have to wear this gear, and I don't think there's an alternative yet um, for for the turnout gear in fire prevention. Trying to protect the firefighter when they go into a fire.
Yeah. Well, it all sounds like important stuff. Brian,
Yeah.
thanks so much for talking with us today, and good luck in this session.
Oh, thank you very much. It's a short session, but it's the same amount of work, just in less time.
Well, good luck, Brian. Thanks a lot.
Hey, appreciate it, Matthew.
We'd like to thank our guest, Brian O'Connor, and our members for the important work they do. The Municipal Voice is a co-production by CCM and WNHH 103.5 FM. Christopher Gilson is our producer, Harry Draws is on the boards, and I'm Matt Ford, your host. Be sure to check out our Facebook page and give us a like, and watch out for our CCM chat series on our YouTube page.